I have the great pleasure and Vergnügen, I would say, today to be joined by a friend of mine who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. He is a composer, a pianist, a what can I say? A unique person, a unique human being. His interpretations and his productions and performances of the classical composers such as Leonard Bernstein, Beethoven, uh, Tchaikovsky, Chopin, Debussy, uh, his incredible interpretation of Irving Berlin. So I could go on and on. He is certainly unique in our profession. He is my friend, and he's joining me from Florence, Italy, that is. And he is Hershey Felder. Hershey,
Hello, Mike. How are you?
was machst du?
Man schleppt sich kommen Zures. What can I tell you? We're schlepping along. But here it's actually quite wonderful. In Italy, the Italians learned how to deal with this very early on, so things are quite well here.
Well, I was just going to ask you. I know I'm in Los Angeles. You are in Florence. It's evening there,
Mhm.
and the pandemic hasn't spared any country, any city. Right now, we're in the middle of July here in Los Angeles, and things are unfortunately going back to square one.
Yeah.
We were already kind of ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
How are you coping there? How has it affected? Well, we'll talk about it
The
in a minute
difference.
because you just did an amazing last week, an amazing broadcast uh, using and taking advantage of the new technology. But how are things in Florence? How are you coping?
It's different than what I'm seeing in America. The most important thing that we're seeing here is that this hit so early and it hit so quickly that it really shocked Italians. And we're just talking today about the difference between what happened here and what happens is happening currently in America. Is that Italians are very afraid of getting sick. And my Italian friends are telling me that, and not just now, but in general, the most sick they're willing to get is having eaten too much pasta and then having a little bit of trouble with the mugen. But but other than that, they don't like to get sick, and it frightens them because it's a very old society here. It's a lot of old people and very family oriented. You have lots of people who still live with their parents, their grandparents. And so when grandparents and parents started to die very quickly and in vast numbers, this terrorized people. And for the first time, I always say, Italians, everything that goes on here is an opera. Nothing is organized. Everything is upside down. This they managed to get right. And because of it, because it was so severe and people really cared, there, knock on wood, we haven't seen a resurgence, and people are still being very, very careful. We don't have essentially an anti-mask community. Everybody does what they're supposed to do, for the most part, and people are being careful. So normal, there's no normal anymore. Where do you go to find normal nowadays? There's no such thing. But in terms of at least living with it, there is a sense of comfort that things are okay. We still don't have tourists here. And as you know, Americans are not allowed to come. So that's the end of that, dollar influx. But as far as life itself on a daily basis goes, people still wait in line outside of the market, and they wait properly and decently, and nobody fights and nobody pushes, and no one, there is this habit of wearing a mask everywhere but where it belongs, some wear it like a beard, other wear it like a bandana and things like this. But for the most part, people are behaved. So we are pretty much virus free in Tuscany, which is kind of miraculous, where you're not seeing this anywhere in the United States, and not a whole lot in the developed world. So
And
we're doing
and
okay.
you're staying safe?
Yeah, I live just above Florence, so I don't have to encounter people if I don't need to. But by the same token, I have been going double masked everywhere. But this weekend, I had to go to Paris this past weekend for 2 days to organize some documents, residence documents, and so on. And I had to do it in Paris for Italy. I'm a Paris resident, but also an Italian resident. But I entered Italy through Paris, which means I had to go. What I saw there was terrifying. There's absolutely no concern on the streets of Paris whatsoever. Everybody's out as if everything is okay. I don't mean everybody, I mean the people who are there. And it's a terrifying thing to go out and nobody's wearing masks. No, they're just doing their thing. A waiter in a restaurant will be wearing a mask, except everybody who's in the restaurant, the jam packed, is not. So it's scary. It's very scary, you know?
It depends on the culture that you are encountering. And Israel right now, I speak to my
Uh-huh.
friends every day. They were doing pretty good for a while, and then
Uh-huh.
the Israeli character. I don't have to tell you.
Sure.
People just and the young people especially.
Hmm.
They just went out as if nothing was wrong. They went to the beaches and the bars, and now they are going through a second wave. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, it's getting very, very bad. So it depends on the culture, the people, and the
Right.
responsibility that you have, not just for yourself. That's the whole point here. It's not just about you.
Right.
It's about everybody else, your family, your children, your older generation. So we're going to be with this for quite a while. Today, I just heard that even if there is a vaccine, we're not talking about this year, maybe the middle of next year.
Hmm.
And so we will still have to be socially responsible.
Sure.
And we're living in a new world, Hershey. It's not the
Yeah.
world we
Well,
knew, and it never will be.
you and I, we had our lives where we were able to be with audiences and theaters and so on. But think about young people who are in the middle of schooling, dreaming about being in the theater. They're 13, 14, 15 years old, and this is happening to them. Or kids just out of college, just finished their training and wanting to do our business and they can't do it. What a thing to happen now.
Hershey, the devastation in our industry, especially
Yeah.
the theatrical industry, not to speak of the motion picture and television,
Hmm.
somehow because of the technology, things are
Hmm.
beginning slowly to wake up because there is what we're doing now. And for example, this technology and is available, and so it may little by little it's starting,
Right.
like you did last week. We'll talk about that in a minute. Performances where people can, strangely and ironically, can access what we do on stage
Hmm.
anywhere in the world. I think your last performance probably was seen by more people in one instance
Absolutely. Yes.
than you could have done performing for a year in theatrical venues.
Right.
So there is that part of it, that maybe the glass is half full. But as far as theatrical productions, I mean, you were talking about young people that want to go into the business, but you have so many now. I mean, Broadway has been closed now since March, and it's been devastating to all these aspiring actors and
Mhm.
dancers and choreographers and writers and directors, not to mention the producers, who came to New York with a dream of, performing. That's what we do. I mean,
Mhm.
like you said, we don't do this for ourselves. Without an
No.
audience, we are meaningless. I mean, we
Right.
do it for them, for our viewers. And right now, it's been 5 months, and only thanks to a wonderful organization, the Actors Fund, which I try to promote all the time, that helps people in our business that are in trouble. But it's going to be going on at least till the end of the year. And you see these kids that have finally made it, and they got into a show, and they were so excited, and they had a salary, and they had health insurance, and all of a sudden it's all gone. And even the side businesses that they could do while they were waiting to make it,
They're gone
like
too.
waiters or bartenders,
Gone.
that's gone. And so we are in a horrible situation that is heart it's heartrending. anyway, let's now that we've settled that, let's go back to our friendship. I started
Sure.
the channel because, as we always used to do, we used to gather. Friends used to gather when you were out here in Los Angeles
Mhm.
with your delightful wife, and she was the consul general at the time here in Los
At the
Angeles.
time, yeah, that's yeah, it's now, my God, 26 years ago. Can you imagine?
Ha-
But Mike, you're not that old.
has it been 20?
You
Impossible.
and I met in LA 26 years ago. Yeah. And when Siona was friends with Spielberg's mother,
That's
remember?
right. We used to gather there. We used to all gather
We used to
at
gather
Leah,
there at
right,
her restaurant. Does
at
that
Leah's
place actually
restaurant.
still exist? The Milky Way, does it still exist? Or
It still exists, and they have remodeled it in her honor. Obviously,
huh,
Leila passed away,
of course.
and the kids have all remodeled it, and it's the way it was, similar to the way it was, but it's still there. But right now, it's closed.
It's
I mean,
closed.
everything
Of
else is
course. Of
closed.
course.
But you and I have known each other for quite a while. When
Oh yeah.
you were a very young kid
Pisher.
at the time.
A pisher.
And I
Pisher.
was a big pisher. You were little, I was a
Yeah.
big pisher. But let's go back and just reminisce a little bit, because the only way to do what we used to do is what I'm doing now. I
Right.
decided, I'm home anyway. Everybody's home. Why
Right.
shouldn't we gather and just schmooze?
That's so much
People do
fun.
a lot of interviews, but that's not what I do. I have a roster now of friends that have agreed to do this,
Good.
and kind of reminisce and get together again. So we met all those years ago. But you were actually born in Canada, right?
I was born in Montreal. Yeah, and I came to the States to study in New York with Jerry Lowenthal when I was 17 years old, something like that. And then I started to do things in theater there in New York, and I met a lot of Broadway folks. And then I came out to LA to do interviews for the Shoah Foundation
The
because I
Shoah
spoke Yiddish.
Foundation, right?
Because I spoke Yiddish, and I also had done a couple of I did a couple of Volksbühne plays in New York with all those old characters. Well, you must remember Mina Bern. You remember
Of
Mina
course.
Bern
Yeah.
and David Rogov, Mina
Brogo.
Bern, David
Yeah.
Rogov. All this cast of characters that Tzipora Speisman, you know.
She ran it at the time. That's right.
Oh, she ran it. Yeah, she ran it, and she ran around it, and she ran us running around her. It was,
Well,
so all of that.
it's still in existence. I did two plays with them a few years ago.
Did
It's
you do it
still.
with Bryna? Didn't you? Did you do
I did
something?
one with
No.
Bryna,
What did you
and
do?
Eleanor Risa, and then we did another one. Um, we did two. One was on Second Avenue, which is a
Right,
review of the
right,
famous Jewish Broadway
right,
of the
right.
1920s and 30s. So I
Hmm.
know you were there in New York, and then from there
I
you
came out to
went
LA.
on to LA.
I came out to LA and I spent a lot of time in LA, met Kim in LA, worked for that Spielberg organization for a bit in LA, and then started developing my work and playing characters, and Gershwin came to light, and so on and
That's what,
so
yeah,
on.
that's what I want to go into. So I didn't know you met Kim in LA. I thought you had met in
Yeah,
Canada.
no, no, no. I met Kim when she was a consul general. I was asked to give a concert in her honor. So apparently I played well.
You must have. And we used to have wonderful gatherings
Dinners, remember
at
the
what's
yeah, the
the
consul.
area that you lived in?
Hancock Park.
Hancock
Hancock
Park.
Park.
Lovely,
Yeah.
lovely house.
Yeah, and we
So
used to come have dinner.
you
Mhm,
then decided, I mean,
mhm.
because you are such a gifted musician and pianist and performer, how did you come up with the idea of the first one was was Gershwin? Was that the first
Yeah,
one?
the first one was Gershwin, and as a kid, of course, I grew up in the theater. I was an actor. I did some television stuff, and so I said, "Let's see if I can mix this." And everybody said, "Oh, it's impossible. You can't be an actor and be a pianist and so on." I said, "Let me say, let me say, let me see," and did it, and it got an audience right away. And this was, my God, 1997. So now we're looking at. How many years ago? My goodness, 97 is 23 years ago
Was
that
that
I act
at the Tiff? Was that at the Tiffany?
at the Tiffany, which
I
no
saw
longer
it.
exists.
We came to see it. Absolutely.
Yeah, the Tiffany. And you remember our old friend who used to be around with us all the time was Theo. You remember
Theo
Theo?
Bickel, yeah, of
Theo,
course.
Theo Bickel was our old Chevraman who used to be a part of this,
Yeah.
and then I remember I still trying to place it, but I remembered when you introduced me to Siona, who I think came after. I think I may have met you before. When did you guys get together?
Yona and I, after my first wife, may she rest in peace, Edie passed away in 95. I met
Hmm.
Siona and we started actually dating in 96.
Hmm.
And so we came together to see
You
you.
would have come together, yes,
Yeah, Siona
absolutely.
would. And did Joel direct that?
Direct
Joel
that.
Swick?
Joel Zwick directed the very first one. That's right. And I remember that I don't know why, but I knew Siona separately from you through Spielberg's mother. She was friends with her or something, wasn't she?
Yes, that's right, through Leah. Uh, by the way, I'm in touch with Joel all the time now. One of the schmoozes that I did,
It
and
was
it's
with
up on
Joel.
my channel, is with Joel,
Uh,
and it was delightful.
Joel is one of the great landsmen of them all.
And
He's a great guy.
isn't he your cousin?
Third cousin that we discovered through the Shoah Foundation when I was interviewing somebody. I found out that Joel Zwick, who I was working with, was actually my third cousin by a series of people who had perished in the Holocaust, whose relatives had moved to LA, I mean, the whole kind of story like this. So yeah, it turns out he's my third cousin after all said and done.
And that was, I guess, the beginning of a
Yeah,
series
96.
of performances that you have done all over the world so
Yeah.
successfully. Uh, the second one was the second one,
The
uh,
second one was Chopin, then came the
Chopin.
early Beethoven, then Bernstein. After Bernstein came Liszt. After Liszt came Berlin. After Berlin came Tchaikovsky. After Tchaikovsky came Debussy. After Debussy is coming Rachmaninoff. But in all of this Mishigas, and then in a second Beethoven, a second Chopin, in all this Mishigas, I also wrote and directed The Pianist of Willesden Lane, which was that play that ran with Mona Golombek. I
Right.
did, and a bunch of other things from various singers and so on and so forth, and artists. And so it's been nonstop for 26 years. And I don't know how you feel, but this is the first time in my adult life that I'm home for longer than 2 weeks since in 26 years.
Well, it's given us the ability to
Mhm.
kind of take a pause
Right,
in our hectic lives and
right.
look back and catch up a little bit uh, to things that we have been neglecting for so many years because we didn't have the time to do it. But
Mhm.
yet it takes discipline because it's very easy. Today is the same as yesterday, and it'll be the same as tomorrow. If we
Mhm.
don't discipline ourselves, then we can get lazy. We have to actually, like what I'm doing now, initiate things as
Mhm.
best we can. And speaking of that, what you was a week ago, was it a week ago
Mhm.
Sunday?
Yep. This
That
past Sunday.
you
So yes, a week ago. Yeah.
Now, how did you put that together? Because
Well,
obviously
yeah, with
we don't have
Michigas.
audiences, and
Yeah.
so you adapted so beautifully the
Mhm.
concept of your Beethoven performance to the age of social media.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, I started it with the Berlin on Mother's Day because I said, I have to keep the staff working and I have to somehow raise funds for theaters because they're suffering. I mean, so many of the theaters that we deal with, they have no source of income, nothing. And donors will only give for so long because they too are having problems. Yes, it's the whole thing is a disaster. So how do you keep people that you work with working and income for them and do something for them? And so I figured out, well, let's just do this and we'll do this as a fundraiser and so on. And I started making calls in Florence and I said, who's here, who's doing film? And not to mention, it was a time at that point we still had to wear masks and completely social distance because the virus was still active. It was in May. So I got a film crew together and we rehearsed and we did camera blocking. And I said, I'm just going to go live to America. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we made all the plans, but when you do something like this, you have no idea what's going to go. And I said, put the cameras on me. We know the choreography, and let's go. And it went and it worked. And because I did it more like cinema than a Zoom or something like this, it really had an effect. So the theater said, you need to do the next ones. I said, okay, we'll do Beethoven. And this past weekend, we did Beethoven with multiple sets and multiple coming and going and walking and doing. And it worked. It worked for the theaters. I mean, I look at it now. It was live. There are things I would prepare for the next one, but the fact is that the system works, and I now know how we can broadcast pieces of theater directly into people's homes that are new and fresh and not captures of something that happened on stage before. And I think for the time being, we're going to have to figure out how to do this for two reasons. One, for people like us to keep on performing, which is what we do for the public. And two, for the public to give them something to hang on to while they can't go to the theater. And in this case, three, in order to help theaters and staff members and so on pay their rent, because that part is so devastating. So it was about reinvention, figuring out a way that I can keep business going so that so that people can eat. It's that basic. It's really that basic.
It is that basic, and what's important is that I think that's the direction that we're all heading in, that same
Yes.
direction, and those that can adapt will survive. Unfortunately, the brick and mortar theaters and companies. I had one of my friends that we did a schmooze was Manny Eisenberg, one of the
Yeah.
great
Sure.
producers, legendary producers on Broadway.
Mhm.
And Manny told me that he has a feeling that many companies will never come back. It is
And
really so bad.
I
Tell me,
must
do you have
admit, yeah.
any idea how many viewers watched the last week?
They're telling me somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 in four countries, because we didn't no, five countries.
Wow.
You know, but that's live. That's not after. That's actually when it
Right,
happened.
right. And
Live.
is it
No, and then
available now?
after we haven't gotten the information on it yet, but live actually at the hour it was between 20 and 30,000, which is, that's in any theater that's a month of playing,
Yeah, at least.
at least
And
a month
and
of playing, and
is it
and and they
available?
had to.
Is it
Sorry.
available now
Yeah,
for
now it's
viewing?
available on you can buy it for a certain time at hersheyfelder.net, which is my name.net. But and I think that starts actually in the next couple of days. They only had it available for a week, and the live performance and so on. But what's nice is people are buying and supporting theaters, and I think that's important. And they also want to be entertained. They want to be able to see things. They want to feel connected. They want to stay connected. I suppose there's a little bit of excitement of getting something from Florence, which is exciting, you know, because it's live, so.
Look, not only that, but I think it's speaking about the availability of such
Right.
entertainment for
Uh-huh.
such a reasonable cost. I mean,
Right.
if you had to go to the theater, five people, a family went to see your show, it would
Oh,
cost them,
terrible.
20 times the amount
Price,
that they pay
easy.
for one showing, and five, six people sit there and watch it. It's a
Right.
bargain. So
It's total bargain. And now that we found this out, is that families with the Berlin, it wasn't the case, because the Berlin, everybody was in lockdown. Now we're hearing, oh, but we see 8 people, so we're having a dinner party, and they're all coming to watch for the dinner party. So you sell one ticket to a group of 10 people. And so that they're doing very well. And but you know what? That's the way it is now. What's the alternative? What's the option? And so I think we're just going to have to look at the mechanism of how this works for the next couple of years. The scary thing is less this mechanism than all the artists who actually have to apply their craft. You and I, we've been on stage for 30, 40, whatever it is, years. We kind of know what we're doing, and if we have to come back to it, we know what we have to do to get there. But what about the people who are developing their talent now and have nowhere to go to continue developing it? What do they do?
I always say, if you are a watchmaker
Hmm.
and you can't open your store, you can always sit at home and work on your watch.
Yeah.
If we can't open our store, which is our theater,
Right.
how do we
Right.
practice our craft
Yeah.
without being able to actually do it? If we
Yeah.
can't do it, and we
Right.
can't do it at home for our library, then we
Right.
can't practice our craft. And that is, as you say, bodes pretty badly for the future of young, up and coming people in our business. One thing that I got to give you a lot of credit for, and I watched the video of this lady in the Bronx who won the,
Oh, yes. Rita. Yes.
what's her name?
Competition. Rita Costanzi.
It was amazing that one of the things that Hershey did was give a prize.
Hmm.
It was like a
An
competition,
arts prize. Yeah.
$25,000,
Yeah.
right? It was
Yep.
amazing. And how many people, sent in videos? Were there many?
Thousands.
Really?
Yeah.
And
It
this
was.
lady was,
Well, I chose the top five in terms of music and storytelling. There was a lot of at-home Zoom things, and there was nothing that really. Don't say it didn't resonate. It all resonated, but there was something about the level of production of these five and there were a few more. There were at least a dozen more. I had to number them. Part of the rules that I had to do in order to satisfy competition rules was I had to assign a number to each of them, and then the five finalists would win by public vote. So as I was assigning things, you really realize some people have the ability to do cinema at home.
sure.
Some people don't have the ability. And I mean, just with their creativity with the camera, one of the things I insisted was understand the only thing we see is what you're showing us on video. We don't see what you feel, what you think when there's no video on. So what you show us is what we see. That's it. That's what we're going to judge on. And there were some amazing performances, and some performances that broke my heart that when I did the numbers didn't get into the last five, but you can only choose five. So you got a problem. But I did my best. And after that, the fact that Rita won without any pushing from me, I said nothing. There they were. They were the five of them. I was so pleased because she's talented, she's committed, she's a good egg, and she told a good story, and it was well produced. So there's that.
It's really heartwarming because it's also her personal story,
Right.
not just her artistic ability. And I urge everybody to watch it. I think it is
It's
up
also
on
there at
your,
hersheyfelder.net. Yeah.
I'll put that up,
Yeah.
hersheyfelder.net,
.net.
to
Yeah.
watch that. So tell me what's in the pipeline now. I know you're planning, it had to be postponed, but that's the Rachmaninoff?
The Rachmaninoff was supposed to open April this season and play at five different theaters, and then I'm actually at this moment was supposed to be at the Wallace in LA where you
Ah,
are.
yeah.
But all this has been postponed because there's no way, of course. And now there is also no timeline for it because we don't know when we're going to be able to do this. I think theaters are now planning April, May, March, something like this.
Of next
But
year.
there's no, yes, but there's no knowing, So they're making plans and they're hoping that something gives, but if something doesn't give, we have to plan again. People are resilient, and this did happen in 1918. Interestingly, in 1918, I just read the other day, they didn't close the theaters in New York. I
Right.
don't know what they did, but they didn't close them, which is kind of a scary prospect. But also 50 million people died, except what they didn't have in 1918 was the internet to report how many people died every day. So this is different. And I think the internet is responsible for less people dying than more people dying. If you take the number of 1918, 50 million, that's Meshuggah. You think of 50 million people, it's more than the whole state of California just disappeared.
That
You know.
that we know of. Uh,
Yes, exactly. So the idea that we will get through is, I think we will. Something will give, some discovery will be made. and hopefully we'll have learned something from it. you know but at the end of the day, next, what is planned is a full season of these broadcasts with different plays, even two or three different artists, um, and just create this sort of sense of community with each one of these through the audiences that's been following me over the years. So it'll be a season of production, so I'll be
And
busy.
this can all will be seen on, if people want to access it, on hersheyfelder.net.
Felder.net, everything. And yeah, and that takes you to the portals of where you can buy the films and so on and so forth. But the live ones are what's fun, because you never know what's going to happen. It's total panic when you start and you go, there's nowhere to go with this. It's just, you're doing it and you hope for the best. Of
But that's how we started. I mean, you mentioned that
course.
you've been in the business 30, 40 years. I've been in this business since I was 7, and that was in 1952. So you do the math. It's a long time. But, the excitement of live theater,
Uh-huh.
and even if, especially, once in a while, the things that happen that maybe
Right,
go wrong, that's what makes it so special, because it's happening right now.
right, right, right.
It's not
Exactly.
been edited and perfected. We don't want perfection. We want
Right.
we want
Real,
to
real.
happen. Right, real,
Right,
real.
right, right.
Herschel, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all my
Mm-hmm.
friends when we schmooze like this.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked it of, I have such a wonderful range of friends from so many different walks of life. I mean, if it's
Mm-hmm.
directors, actors, just personal friends. One of the schmoozes that I have, one of the first ones that I did, actually the first one was with Norman Lear, because I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to start this channel with somebody of clout, so that
Right.
when I ask other people to join me, they'll realize that it's serious. It's not just
Sure.
a home video. And then I discovered, because what I've been doing lately is taking all my hundreds of VHS tapes. We all, in those days we had videotapes,
Right, of
and
course.
transferring them all to digital,
Right.
so that I can preserve it for my grandkids. And one of the things I found was an interview that I did in 1990 with Zubin Mehta, and
Mm.
so I put it
Who
up.
was who was just here in Florence just recently, like last week.
Well, he's always, every year he
Right.
conducts there, but right now, and I asked the question I'm going to ask you. I asked Zubin, I asked Joel, your cousin, I asked so many friends. If I were to ask you, uh, for one individual who inspired your life,
Hmm.
who would it be?
One individual who inspired my life. That's a rough question, man.
I know. I can tell you what Zubin said.
Go ahead. What did he say?
Gandhi.
Okay, fair enough. Um, well, I'm not allowed to divide it in two, am I? I have no
Yes, you are.
choice,
No,
right?
no, no. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. It's there's there's
Who was
there
it
are
that
two people.
inspired your life?
Well, there are actually three people connected with three events. The first was my mother, who, when I was very young, she got very sick, and she died when she was 35 and I was 13. And her major concern through all her illness, it was cancer, was that my sister and I would be okay. And that was her dying concern, that we needed to be okay. And whatever she could do before she died to help us be okay was an important thing. That taught me about a deep menschlichkeit, the deep of what it means to really care about other people, is that when you are faced with the very worst, which is death in this case, that somebody else matters, you know? That was, I said, an ethic. My father then, who was left with the two of us, alone, in a devastating state, of course, because I was 13, my sister was 9, and my poor father had just lost his wife, and it was so devastating. He managed to hold it together, and I realized that whatever you're faced with, you can handle it, as terrible as it is. And then after that, it would have to be Kim, my wife, who had been through so much in her own in her political career, having to deal with the real world, which is not always so pleasant. And, no matter what happens, you get up and you dust yourself off and you go on. And it's those three ethics that actually taught me what it is to be a human being. So it really is a combination of three people, all who had the same idea about what it means to be a mensch, but this idea of, you know, it's not going to be easy, but you have to get up and you have to do it. And I think that's kind of what guides me, why I'm doing all these Meshuggah things right now, and figuring out ways to get through this, is because it's not okay to just sit at home and relax and say, you know what, I've been on the road for 26 years. This is my year to take off. The staff should live and be well. Good luck to them. I really felt a responsibility to do whatever I can, even if it's very small. And it is very small compared to what's going on in the world. It's just a small, tiny corner to help whoever I can help in any little way that I can, while taking care of the staff and taking care of the people that need to be taken care of. And that, it was my goal not to let anyone go from the company, unless they, wanted to take time off or something, but not to force anybody out, and just to try and make this work for as many people as I could. And I've tried, and I hope I can keep it going until we are all back on our feet, so that at least I know that the families that I'm involved with are looking after their rent, and they're feeding their families, and so on and so forth. That's the goal now, just to get through this. And if I can use entertainment to do that, then that's what I'm going to do. So that's where I'm at. And those were the influences. So it's an ethic, I guess, that influenced me, with a combination of those three people.
And the word you used right now was so important as well to in any endeavor. You said try. All we can do is try our best.
Yeah.
That is the goal, I think. And honesty. Try in an honest way, and people respond to that. What about your career? Is there someone that you would mention or think of that inspired you artistically?
Well, I'm inspired by the guys who have been long dead artistically, all the old great pianists, the great actors from yesteryear. They inspire me, but in terms, here's the thing. This is why it's a hard question to answer. There are so many people who've contributed to what it is I do, from Joel Zwick to literally all the people I've worked with over the years. And I think above all, the audiences. It took a long time to understand that audiences are not there to kill me. They're not there to eat me alive. They're not, you come on the stage and you think they're here all they want to do is see you fail. And what you begin to realize is, no, all they want is to see you succeed. And they want, they're not there to get you. They're there because they want to share with you. And I think, in terms of the technical part of it, of course, Joel and all the others who have taken part, but it's really the audience. Time and time again, we're there for them. That's what we do.
Right. That's right.
We're there for them.
That's
And we have to remember that we're not there for us. It feels good sometimes to do a good show. And, as you well know, having done runs that go on forever, sometimes it doesn't feel so good to have to do, 8 shows after doing it for 20 weeks and you're exhausted and so on. But the audience is there, and they deserve everything we can give to them. And that they keep on coming back has been the greatest gift. So if I'm grateful to anyone as an influence, it's the audience. And also, they are the ones that teach me, because if they're not getting it, I'm doing something wrong, you know? And that's the collective audience is always the smartest group. They get it, you
and
know?
we always have to remember that each
Mhm.
audience is seeing it for the first time.
Right.
Sometimes, as you say, when you do a Broadway show for a few years and they're doing 8 shows a week, and by the end of the week, sometimes you're only human and you get a little exhausted. And the worst thing is when you go and see performance and the actor is phoning it in. And that's, for me, that's the worst that can
Right.
happen. I will never forget in 1966, I was in London
Hmm.
and Olivier was doing Otello
Hmm.
with Maggie Smith as Desdemona. And I said, this is something I cannot miss. I got a ticket
Sure.
and I went to see it was a matinee.
Uh-huh.
And I hate to say this because it's heartbreaking, but I was watching Olivier on stage and he wasn't there. He
Right.
just wasn't there. All the nuances, the
Mhm.
voice, the tones going up and down, the eyes, opening and closing with the eyelashes. Physically he was there, but he was phoning it in. He must have been either exhausted. It was at the end of the run, and it
Mhm.
was one of the biggest lessons I learned that you may be Sir Laurence Olivier, but you have an obligation to every
Right.
performance, every person that buys a ticket that comes to see you. They're seeing it for the first time. No matter what, if you can't do it, then stop. Don't do it. But
Right.
if you
And
do it,
I'm so with you.
you have to do the best you can, and
Yeah.
that's
Well,
what
you're
we
that
need.
kind of performer. Every time I've seen you, and I've seen you probably half a dozen times and half a dozen different things, you just give everything you have every time you do it, whenever you do it, even when we're singing in the living room, which has happened, and even when you're on the big stage doing Jolson. The big one I saw you was somewhere in Pasadena. I
Yes,
saw you do this amazing Jolson, and it's years ago now, but
that's
I
right.
remember seeing you, and I remember you did one action and it stayed with me all these years that you could never even do. And I remember discussing it with you after, and that was how to deal with the blackface. Do you remember
Yes.
what you did? Because I remember what you did. Do you remember what you did? I'm
We
sure you
had no
do.
choice. Yeah, we had no choice because that is such a sensitive issue. Not to mention nowadays, forget
Yeah.
about it. But this
Right.
was in 1999.
Yeah.
We had just that was the last leg of a national tour with a
Right.
musical about Al Jolson. And when we started rehearsing, I was supposed to do blackface to perform in blackface because Al Jolson did. That was a theatrical thing that in those days,
Mm-hmm.
all the stars, Judy
Right.
Garland and Fred Astaire, they all used to do a blackface, and it was a theatrical convention. And then our first opening, the first performance, was supposed to be in Cleveland, Ohio. This national tour was opening in Cleveland, Ohio, and we
Mm-hmm.
got a call from the mayor of Cleveland, who was a black man, and he said, "I understand that you're going to be doing blackface in this show." And our producer said, "Yes, it's about Al Jolson. That's what he was known for." He said, "Well, then you're not coming to Cleveland because the theater was a municipal theater in
Right.
Cleveland. They were reopening it." And he said, "You're not coming." And we had to make a choice. This was a huge tour with 100 people. And so we got together, and I made the suggestion that we have to compromise, and compromise in life, no matter what it is. If people are
Mm-hmm.
not willing to compromise, you
Yeah.
can't live together. You can't get
Yeah.
along. Whether it's the Israelis and Palestinians or blackface and the mayor of Cleveland, not to make that comparison. But anyway, I said, you know what? Okay, we'll find the opening scene was Jolson in his dressing room. He's putting on blackface to go out and perform the Toot Toot Tootsie Goodbye. And I said, you know what? I'm going to decide, Jolson is going to decide, you know what? I don't want to be known as the blackface performer. I want them to see Al Jolson. I want to
Right.
be known for myself. I want them to like me and not just, I forget the name of the character that he played. And so I said, you know what? I'm taking off the makeup and I'm going out as Al Jolson. And Schubert, who was the producer of the show, came into the dressing room. He said, you can't do that. They won't come. They won't want, they want to see,
How do you
blackface.
do that?
And I said, I'm sorry, but it's my show. I took the makeup off. I went out and I performed, and that was the compromise, and they accepted it, and that's
Right.
the way it
I,
was.
I remember it. I remember it, you doing this and then wiping it off, and that was.
Wiping
I
it off.
remember it like yesterday, and I saw it. That Pasadena theater was huge. I remember sitting far back and seeing that, and it really was. It made an impression because it really struck me then how important this issue was. And this is 21 years ago. It's we haven't even dealt with those characters. I mean, good lord, the idea of I mean, look, Kate Smith, they said she sang the song that people didn't like, so she's got to be, the statue of her has got to be taken down. Even when who was singing it, somebody else sang it. I think Robeson sang it. Somebody
Or
else
up.
sang the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he sang it also. But when she sang it, it was considered a anti-black song. So all of a sudden, this was last year, 2 years ago, that this whole brouhaha happened. We haven't even dealt with. I mean, think of this, character that we both sing and talk about a lot, Gershwin. I mean, the idea of Porgy and Bess coming from a Jewish boy, which such a thing couldn't get produced otherwise, and the horrible name he used to call his opera, which is what he used to call it, because it was okay to use the N-word then. It was never okay, but it was socially acceptable. So, there's a lot of history that has to be looked at, and how do we look at it, and how, so much of our tradition, the one that you and I employ, comes from a lot of Jews borrowing a lot of Black American colors, and by that I mean musical colors. And so it's a very interesting thing to think about, and how it works.
And vice versa.
Mhm.
I'm sure you know the story that I saw it in a documentary actually.
Right.
Uh, Gershwin's in Porgy and Bess, it ain't necessarily so.
Uh-huh.
It ain't necessarily so.
Crumbs come the Haftorah.
From the Haftarah.
Sure.
Baruch atah Adonai Hashem Eloheinu melech haolam.
So, which is, but George Gershwin himself said that, this all came out of love and respect, and going down to the South came out of love and respect. And now we're reanalyzing what that means, not in particular with Gershwin, but just in particular in general, what white privilege means and so on. It's a very complicated story. And, they opened the Met this past season, the opera in New York, with Porgy and Bess. And of course, it was before Black Lives Matter took real, very solid hold with the important issues. Would they be able to do it now, a year later? I'm not so sure they could go anywhere near that opera, a year later, with the people doing it in the way they're doing it. It's very curious, the whole thing. But I think we have a lot of learning all over the world. And like you say, this pandemic forced everyone to take a pause and kind of think about stuff.
And
You know?
reassess, many
Right.
things. But, we mustn't also go to the other extreme
Yeah, I'm
and
with you.
be
Of course.
ridiculous and exaggerate.
Right.
Uh, and yet we have to understand this is an issue that's really not something that is debatable. It
No.
is it
Yeah.
is a emotional issue, and when you try to debate it, you're going to lose. You just have to understand and be open to other people, uh, and we will.
It's we're going. I mean, we're going through a good learning period, and I think it is a good period. And one of the things I hope that happens in this is that, the finger pointing, the accusations, the threats on all sides, that those stop and people actually listen to each other
Ah,
and find a way that we can all go on together and forward, because it's interesting. You'll appreciate this. I think you also come from a family of Holocaust survivors, don't you?
not directly. Most of my father's
Mhm.
family perished in the Holocaust. My
Right.
mother's were lucky; they came to the
They were
United
already. They
States.
were
Great
already.
miracle.
Were they in Israel? They were already in Israel. Was that it, or no?
No, not in Israel. No, my grandparents on my mother's side came to the United States
United
in
States.
the 19th century, and
Right.
so we were
So
very
they were already
lucky.
here.
but my
Um,
father's entire family perished.
Family, yeah. Well, you know, my both sides, except for the immediate family in Hungary and Poland. And there was this always, because I'm a very big studier of Holocaust and Holocaust period, the issue whereby people who were friends, who lived next door to one another, who would have each other over for dinners, suddenly this whole division, this whole rhetoric of you know, of Jude, of you know, and wanting to make everything Judenfrei and so on and so forth. These people who had been together for so long as neighbors and friends suddenly stopped talking to one another and suddenly became enemies of the highest, except for those who were the righteous Gentiles who took care and who helped. And lahavdil, because you must, because there is a difference. And you know, you think of today, and you think of people who have worked alongside, not noticing color, you know, black people and brown people working alongside Jewish people and so on and so forth, in a very copacetic kind of way. And there has been a lot of that. And I think that's the important thing, not to paint everything with one brush, that everybody has been white privileged and so on. I can't believe that to be the case. I don't think it's the case for me, but you know, who knows? The point is that so much animosity has developed that all the good work that has been done over the past, since the civil rights movement, which Jews were so involved in, is, I'm afraid that it might dissipate to such a degree where there may be animosities where animosities didn't exist. Am I making sense about yeah, that?
Not only sense, but you are being sympathetic to another point of view, and that's what's missing right now. You know, people are talking at each other and not
Right.
with each other and not listening. You know, it's easy to hear, but it's more difficult to listen to what you're
Listen.
hearing.
Yeah.
My dear, dear friend, it's been such a pleasure, you know, to get together like this. I hope as soon as possible, either you'll visit us here or we'll visit you there. And
Come here. It's nice. The food is good. The food is good. Well, when they let Americans back in, but you can try. Don't you have an Israeli
I
passport?
can come on my Israeli passport.
You come on your.
Absolutely.
And Siona has also. She also has
Yes,
it here.
she was born in Israel. So
So I see it as a perfect opportunity to get on a plane.
yes,
You're finding your roots, you know, and come and visit us here. But it's wonderful. Thank you for having me. It's always so good to speak to you.
thank you. And I leave you, as I always do, with my motto, Carpe Diem, which I don't have to explain in Italy. It means seize the day.
We
And
try.
let's do it. Hershey, I love you.
Thank you, my dear.
My love to
Lots of
Tim.
love.
And thank you, folks, for joining us. And we'll see you next time.